Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahawashi, Bahasham, Barakahakodash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who ruled and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the Brother Ra'aya with another video, and in this video, I'll be profiling an article from the dailymail.co.uk titled, Israeli Warplanes Prepare for Simulated Attack on Iran as Nation's Defense Chiefs Meet with U.S. to Plan Worst-Case Scenario Destruction of Tehran's Nuclear Facilities. And these simulated attacks on Iran will become real attacks on Iran. And it's going to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, World War III in that Middle Eastern region. This is Jeremiah 49, verse 20. Therefore, hear the counsel of Yahweh that he had taken against Edom, and the biblical Edomites are known today as the so-called white people, and his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. And that least of the flock is speaking of those Israelis, the 1948ers over in the Holy Land right now, who are Edomites of the tribe of Amalek. And as it says, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. These 1948ers are going to do something to provoke a response from Iran, which is going to set bigger pieces into play, drawing in the United States of America and NATO nations in on their side for a war against Iran. And on the side of Iran, it's going to draw in nations like Russia and China. And it's going to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon. And as we're about to see in that article, a prophecy is happening right on time. We truly are living in very biblical times. We're living in the last days of the rulership of these heathen nations, chiefly these Edomites, before Yahawashi Hamashiach, whom the world ignorantly refers to as so-called Jesus Christ's second coming, where he's going to save the elect of the nation of Israel, the 144,000, and the rest of the righteous one-third of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, as well as the Israelite foreigners who look like these heathen nations, and to put the final nail in the coffin of the rulership of you heathen nations. Again, chiefly you Edomites, before ushering in the kingdom of heaven, where the children of Israel will rule for eternity. And as it says, surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. And during the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, that's when nuclear missiles are going to be shot to the ends of the earth. And the habitations of the United States of America are going to be made desolate because it's going to be hit with 200 million nuclear missiles that's going to turn it into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards, where only the elect will survive that destruction. And the land of Israel, those habitations will be made a desolation because they're going to be hit with nuclear missiles as well and wipe out everybody in it. Now let's get into a little bit of this article. Israeli warplanes preparing for long-range exercise over Mediterranean in 2022. Drill will test ability to cover distances needed to attack Iran's nuclear facilities. News emerged as Israeli Defense Minister travels to U.S. today, with sources saying two sides will discuss joint drills to prepare for attacks against Iran. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out, comes amid stalled talks between U.S. and Tehran over its nuclear program. Israel is preparing for an aerial training mission that will simulate an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities as the country's defense chiefs meet with their U.S. counterparts to plan their next moves should negotiation with Tehran fail. The Israeli exercise will take place next year and involve F-35 stealth bombers accompanied by F-16 and F-15 fighters flying 600 miles out over the Mediterranean to replicate the distance required to strike nuclear targets in Iran. News of the drill emerged ahead of a meeting between Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz and U.S. defense chiefs today, with sources saying the two sides will discuss joint drills designed to prepare for strikes on Iran if they become necessary, when they become inevitable. Zeev Elkin, Israel's housing and construction minister, said the aim of the exercises is to prepare for every eventuality before adding, "We will not allow Iran to go nuclear." I'm going to skip around a little bit in this article and get to the main points. The 2015 agreement, talking about the JCPOA, gave Iran sanctions relief but imposed strict limits on its uranium enrichment activities, extending the time it would need to produce enough fissile material for a nuclear weapon, if it chose to at least a year from around 2 to 3 months. Most nuclear experts say the period is now considerably shorter. And if you remember, during Donald Trump's presidency, he pulled the U.S. out of the JCPOA, which heavily tarnished the deal and made Iran go back on some of the measures they agreed to and began enriching more uranium. And the reason the U.S. pulled out is because they're puppets of the state of Israel. And the state of Israel wants a war with Iran. So by proxy, the United States of America wants a war with Iran, playing into, again, Jeremiah 49 verse 20, "The least of the flock shall draw them out." And America's own European allies wanted the deal to stay together because they know that if a war with Iran starts between Israel and the U.S. against Iran, hey, it's going to drag them into it. And that's exactly what's going to happen, playing into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. But on the flip side, during World War III, America's own allies are going to turn against her and ally themselves with Iran's allies like Russia and China, and they're all together going to shoot those 200 million nuclear missiles onto this place. Underlining how badly eroded the deal is, that pact does not allow Iran to enrich uranium at Fordo at all, let alone with advanced centrifuges. With the deal's nuclear benefits now badly compromised, some Western officials say there is little time left before the foundation of the deal is damaged beyond repair. Such drills by the United States and Israel could address calls by Dennis Ross, a former senior U.S. official and Middle East expert, and others to openly signal to Iran that the United States and Israel are still serious about preventing it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Biden needs to disabuse Iran of the notion that Washington will not act militarily and will stop Israel from doing so, Ross wrote last month. Ross even suggested the United States should perhaps signal a willingness to give the Israelis the U.S. military's bunker-busting, massive ordnance penetrator, a 30,000-pound bomb. Asked about such remarks about deterrence, the senior U.S. official said, "When President Biden says Iran will never get a nuclear weapon, I mean, he means it." Let's see. That's pretty much it with this article. You get the point. But again, as you can see, biblical prophecy is taking place before our very eyes. That least of the flock is beginning to draw them out. And what it's going to play into is that bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat in that Middle Eastern region. This is Joel chapter 3. I'm going to start at verse 9. "Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, the heathen Gentiles, the Edomites, the so-called white people, the Ishmaelites, the so-called Arabs, the Moabites, the so-called Chinese, the Elamites, the so-called East Indians, etc., etc." And that's exactly what the true men of the Lord, the prophets of the Most High, are doing by going out onto the highways and byways preaching this word, as well as putting up video epistles like this. "Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war. war against Iran, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, World War III, nuclear war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. And as we just read in that article, we are seeing the mighty men being woken up and drawing near, with the U.S. and the state of Israel planning joint simulated drills against Iran's nuclear facilities. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, the United States of America, the state of Israel, Iran, Russia, China, these NATO nations, etc., etc., and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh, and those mighty ones are the death angels of the Most High, holding back this great destruction, waiting to get the go-ahead to release it, which is mainly going to happen after the MOTB, the Charagma, in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18 is mandatorily implemented. Verse 12, let the heathen be wakened and come up to the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which in the Hebrew is Yahweh Shaphat, or Yahweh's judgment, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. And when you go up to the first couple of verses in this chapter, you'll see why the Most High is judging these heathens for afflicting the apple of his eye, the children of Israel, who are again the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And at the top of the list, that heathen nation that did the most against the nation of Israel, as pursuant to Psalms chapter 83, are you Edomites. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes at the valley of decision, for the day of Yahweh is near in the valley of decision. And when we read articles like that, we can see that the day of Yahweh is very near in the valley of decision. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim are edified. Just keep strong and keep pushing this word. As we can clearly see, we're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.